Why has the United States held back for so long and still dared not really strike Venezuela? This whole thing is pretty strange. U.S. warships were already deployed in the Caribbean. The threats were made loud and clear, yet nothing actually happened. So today, let's break it down and talk about what Washington is really afraid of. The first reason, and the biggest one, is over in the Taiwan Strait. You think the U.S. doesn't want to make a move? They've probably drafted the plans hundreds of times. So why don't they dare? Because China is watching from behind. Haven't you seen how packed Chinese warships are in the East China Sea? That's a very clear message to the United States. If you dare to use force in Venezuela, I'll move in the Taiwan Strait. For the U.S., strike Venezuela here, lose Taiwan there. That consequence is simply too serious. The U.S. can't afford it. What it fears isn't Maduro's limited forces. What it fears is fighting on two fronts, east and west, at the same time. That would be total disaster. And Venezuela itself isn't easy to deal with either. It has real backing from China. Money when it needs money, supplies when it needs supplies. That means if the U.S. attacks, it won't be anything like Iraq. It could turn into a second Afghanistan, or something even worse. Someone would keep pumping blood into Venezuela. The U.S. is watching Russia struggle in Ukraine. It has no desire to get dragged into another quagmire, because if that happens, its position as the world's top power would be in real danger. Maduro is actually quite clever. He keeps saying, China's victory is our victory, deliberately tying himself to China and making Washington even more hesitant to act. There's another problem, one the U.S. created itself. Right now, the world looks like a chain reaction. Ukraine has Russia tied down. Pakistan keeps India from fully focusing. North Korea holds South Korea by the throat. The U.S. wanted the Philippines to stir trouble in the South China Sea to contain China, but the Philippines itself is unstable. Meanwhile, China is launching aircraft carriers one after another, and its eyes are already set beyond the second island chain. Looking around the board, the U.S. suddenly finds itself checkmated. It desperately wants to use Japan to provoke China into acting first, whether in the East China Sea or the Taiwan Strait, so the U.S. can free its hands to deal with Venezuela. But China simply refuses to take the bait. No matter how much Japan stirs things up, China moves at its own pace. So now, the ones getting anxious are the U.S. and Japan, while China calmly sits back and fishes. So do you see it now? It's not that the U.S. suddenly grew soft-hearted, and it's not that Venezuela can't be beaten, it's that the timing is terrible. The cost of action is unbearably high. Washington is trapped in a dilemma. Attack Venezuela, and it risks losing Taiwan and damaging its hegemony. Don't attack, and it loses face and credibility collapses. What it wants most is for China to make the first move in East Asia. But China simply won't fall for it. In this world, everything is linked, one move after another. The U.S. is holding a big stick, only to realize it's surrounded by hedgehogs, with no idea where to strike. What's even more suffocating is that the sharpest spike might be right under its own feet. It's not that it doesn't want to move. It's that it's truly afraid that once it does, the entire chessboard will flip. And now, the initiative in this global game is slowly slipping out of its hands.